try to be sensitive to everybody's time, so we'll try to keep the talk to about 30 minutes, and then we're going to do a question answer session afterwards. So feel free to stick around if you're able. In addition to recording the webinar, we're also going to have some PDF documents of the notes for the webinar, as well as a worksheet for some of the practical application stuff we're going to talk about. So feel free to just listen and not have to worry too much about taking notes. And we also have some links in those PDFs for further material if you're interested in kind of, you know, getting more in depth in some of the things we're going to be talking about today. All right, so let's get right into it. Why are we here? Branding is very elusive for a lot of people. It's full of jargon, it's very impractical. I think just by the turnout today, we can see, you know, a lot of people are wanting to clarify this and do this better. We all kind of know that we need to brand ourselves, but very few of us actually understand how to do this well. Even big companies amazingly get this wrong a lot of times. And it's because you really have to understand some foundational things about how people think in order to connect with them. And that's what branding is really all about. This is especially important in real estate because you need to differentiate yourself from a sea of other agents who are really all doing the same thing you do, right? So what makes you different? And that's what we want to get into in this webinar. We want to help you have a firmer grasp on, you know, some of the concepts behind it and some practical application ideas for how to really refine your brand and communicate it well. And this is going to be what helps you differentiate yourself from other agents. So we're going to talk about what good branding is about, what it's not about, and give you some practical ideas. So just in short, we're going to cover what it is and what it's not. Like I just said, we're going to talk about some common mistakes. We're going to talk about the psychology of resonating with your buyers and sellers and why that's important, because it is extremely important and extremely overlooked. We're also going to talk about a couple of case studies of brands that we all know very well so that we can kind of pick it apart and see what they're doing to kind of give ourselves some ideas. And then we're going to talk about practical application ideas that will help you really come away from this defining your brand better. And of course, a Q&A session at the end. So I want to start with the definition of branding. According to Merriam-Webster, it means to impress indelibly, which really is just a fancy way of saying to distinguish in an unforgettable way. So this actually has a German root to the word. To brand comes from a German word which was associated with burning. It means to burn in German, and it had to do with livestock. Some of you might already be familiar with this, and it's actually a practice that a lot of farmers still use today. But they would brand their cattle with a hot rod and essentially tattoo the name of the owner on the cow. So what that really was these people were giving a cow their logo. And this is where the whole idea of branding comes from, because people were able to tell the cows apart and to whom they belonged and make that association right away. So this is really the root of branding. And I think understanding the history of it helps us understand what it needs to be. It needs to be this differentiating factor. So to start off, I want to talk about what branding is not, because there's a lot of common mistakes when it comes to branding. First of all, a brand is not your logo. A logo reminds people of your brand. The reason I want to bring this up is because I hear people say all the time, I've got to come up with a good logo. I need to make my logo better. And yes, you should, because a logo is really what makes you look professional. It helps people recognize you. But it's step 2, and that's really important to remember, because step 1 is that you need to have a good brand, because a logo is kind of like a megaphone. That's how I like to look at it. It's reminding people of something. So you really have to know what that something is that you want people to be reminded of, right? It makes sense if you really think about it. And that's the only way your logo is going to be effective. So you need to think of your logo like a memory jogger, something that's going to spark recognition, but spend a lot more time thinking about what it is that you want people to recognize. I like to talk about it like your brand is the horse and your logo is the cart, and you can't put the cart before the horse. So it is important to have a good logo, but your brand is more important. Branding is also not advertising, at least not in the sense that we typically think of it, because advertising usually has to do with selling something. Okay, it's selling what you do. It's selling a product or service generally. Whereas branding, when you do it correctly, is actually about communicating. So you're letting people why you do what you do, how you're different. So this is also an important thing to be able to understand so that you really know what you're trying to accomplish with branding. Products are made in the factory, but brands are created in the mind. I love this quote by Walter Landor. If you don't know, Walter Landor is the founder of Landor, which is a brand consulting company responsible for branding companies like Coca-Cola, Bank of America, British Airways, and thousands of others actually that we all know. So clearly this guy knows what he's talking about, and he's extremely right. And we're going to get into more about how a brand is created in the mind in just a couple of minutes. Because it's really very much about understanding your target market and resonating with them. But the reason I bring this quote up right now is because, again, we need to know what exactly we are trying to accomplish with branding. It's all about the idea that you are trying to communicate to somebody. All right, so enough about what branding is not. Let's talk for a minute about what it is. Branding is your message. It's just that simple. It's what you do, it's why you do it, it's how you're different. When I say how you're different, I mean how you're different than somebody else offering a similar service or the same service exactly. So we call this in marketing lingo your brand message, and that's just all that it is. It's what you're trying to communicate about what you do, why you do it, and why it's different. And actually your slogan should be a summary of this brand message. So we're going to look at an example of how to do this at the end of the webinar. Jeff Bezos, CEO of Amazon, says, "Your brand is what other people say about you when you're not in the room." I love that. That comes back down to, you know, the brand being created in somebody's mind. So what are we trying to accomplish with good branding, actually? It's that we will stand for what we want to stand for in someone's mind. Because you stand for something whether you like it or not. They're going to think of you some way or another. So branding is really about controlling, for lack of a better word, controlling that outcome of what you stand for in their mind and kind of crafting their perception of you in that way. Their reaction to you, their desire to do business with you is going to follow their feeling about you. So it's important to know what you want to stand for in their mind. Branding is the art of becoming knowable, likable, and trustable. John Jantz said that. He's an author and also a TEDx speaker. And I think that is a great way of summarizing what we are trying to accomplish with branding. So let's talk for a little bit about the psychology of good branding, because as I mentioned in the beginning, this is really critical and foundational, a lot more than people realize. I want to talk about why resonating makes people want to do business with you and why it's part of your brand message, or why it should be part of your brand message. The definition of resonate is simply to produce a positive feeling, emotional response, or opinion. But, you know, that just means leaving an impression, being memorable, sticking in someone's mind, striking a chord, and that kind of thing. Nancy Duarte, who is an author of a book called Resonate, appropriately, says people will usually respond only if it's in their best interest. This is really interesting and important to keep in mind, because that's going to kind of tweak the way that you present themselves. Yourself. You're going to want to present yourself in a way that people see you as the solution, what they've always been looking for type deal. If you don't come across as relevant to somebody, they're actually not really going to care about you. They care more about themselves. That's human nature, unfortunately. But people are going to resonate with you because you represent something they want or can relate to or need. So take some time to think about your target market and what that might be for them. This principle is why certain books and movies get so popular. It's because we can relate to them. We relate to the main characters. We relate to their hopes, their goals, their dreams, all of that kind of thing. So even in the scenario where, let's say you send a postcard as a realtor, you send me a postcard about your services and I get it in my mailbox and I give you a call to list my house because I got that postcard. At the end of the day, I'm still calling you because you resonated with me about something. Your postcard conveyed something, either that you're an expert in my area, that you're going to help me sell my house fast, that you're trustworthy. For some reason or another, you represented something I wanted. And that is why I called you. I didn't call you just because you sent me a postcard. So this is really helpful if you really spend some time thinking about it. It will really craft your message, your marketing material, and everything that follows. So this is going to really be what makes you the realtor I want to hire rather than just another realtor, okay? Nancy Duarte also said, and this is a paraphrase, but she said, figure out what they care about and link it to what you do. I love that as well. So this is essentially your brand message. What she just said is your brand message. It's that linking to what they care about. So psychologically, consistency is another thing that we need to talk about because it matters a lot. Studies show that repetition of the same thing over and over is what helps people remember things. This is true of foreign languages. This is true of, classroom. Whoops, sorry about that. Let me get back to my slide. This is true of classroom lessons. We know this in elementary school. We had to learn the same thing in history over and over. We had to write down our vocabulary words over and over. It's because that's how the human brain works. And the same is true about your brand. So if you are mixing and matching the message that you're conveying to people, if you're saying one thing on your social media, but another thing in your listing presentations, if you have one slogan in your email signature, but something else on your Facebook page, it's going to make it harder for people to remember who you are and what you do and what you stand for. So keep that in mind and don't mix and match. The point of this webinar is really to help you come away with a better idea of your brand, or some ideas to go away from here and define your brand if you haven't already. But once you have that defined, keep it consistent because you want to stick in people's minds. So practically speaking, that's going to apply to your listing presentation, your website, your social media sites, your business cards, your email signatures, your slogan, your logo, and even your links. Like if you have more than one Facebook page, for example, always link to the same one. Don't randomly pick one or the other depending on where your link is. Just make sure everything is the same all the time, and that's going to help people remember you. Okay, so the last psychological piece and the most important is that why is the foundation for every single thing we do. So I want to give you just a quick example of this in practical life terms. So if I say I just ate a banana, why did I just eat the banana? Because I don't want to feel hungry, right? Or if I say I want to go on vacation, why do I want to go on vacation? Because I want relaxation. Or lastly, if I just buy a new car, why did I buy the new car? Because I don't want to keep spending money repairing my old one. So we all know how this works in day-to-day life. Like this is not something new that I'm saying here, but people often overlook that this is the exact same principle that drives people's business decisions also. So people are doing business with you because something, because they want or need something that they believe you stand for or can provide to them. So again, this comes down to understanding what that person wants and becoming that solution in the way that you're conveying to them what you do. People don't buy what you do. They buy why you do it. What you do simply proves what you believe. This is a quote from Simon Sinek, who wrote a book called Start With Why. And he's a TEDx speaker and just a phenomenal psychologist, really, when it comes to branding and what drives people. And he's so right. He also notices that every organization on the planet knows what they do. Some know how they do it. Very few know why they do what they do. So make sure you are one of those few, because that will really set you apart. So the real foundational point of all of this psychology of why is most companies are focusing on what they do. So in real estate terms, that would be, I sell homes, right? That is what you do. But what you do is not unique, if you think about it, because hundreds and thousands and hundreds of thousands of other agents all over the place do that exact same thing. So what you do is not why clients are doing business with you. Why you sell homes is why people choose to do business with you over someone else. Even if they don't realize that that's why they're choosing to do business with you, psychologically, that is why they're choosing it. So an example of this in action would be, instead of saying, I sell homes, you would say, I believe that selling a home doesn't have to be stressful. Now, you see what that does to your perception? Suddenly I'm doing business with you because I'm like, oh yeah, well, I don't want to have a stressful home selling experience. That guy stands for that, so I'm going to choose that person. And bam, you've resonated with me. That's why I'm doing business with you. So that's just kind of a small example in a way that will hopefully hit home for our particular industry of real estate. I want to look at a couple of case studies that are not real estate related, but we can translate the principles into real estate. And I've chosen these because they're so well known that we can really see this in action. I want to start with Apple. Apple, if they were like every other company that focuses on what they do, they would say, we make great computers. They're beautiful to use with a simple design and user-friendly. Want to buy one? But instead, what they focus on is why they do what they do. And this looks like, we believe in challenging the status quo. The way we do this is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. We just happen to make great computers. Again, this is a quote from Simon Sinek, the same author that I quoted before. He's really a rich resource when it comes to this kind of thing. But notice how that changed. It was the same thing that they were saying. It's the same thing that Apple's saying in both cases, but the emphasis is different. So you can kind of see that when you compare the two things. So if we think about it, what does Microsoft do? They make great computers too, right? Actually, you can get a much better PC with better specs for a fraction of the cost of a Mac. So why do we think about the two companies differently? They have the exact same what? They both make great computers. The only reason we think of them differently is because they've communicated different things about themselves over the years, and that's affected our perception of them. So think about that. That's like really a powerful example of how this works. That is the power of branding. I'm going to have a link in the PDF of the notes for this webinar, a link to an Apple branding ad, which is really phenomenal. So I encourage you to watch that and kind of see this principle in action there. The next company I want to talk about is Nike, which is a shoe company that never talks about shoes. Think about it. So all their ads, they don't talk about shoes. They talk about great athletes. They talk about great athletics. And so when people think about Nike, they think about great athletics, right? We believe that they are great because they're always talking about greatness. They're not talking about shoes. This is like really amazing if you think about it. Because what's the difference really between Nike and New Balance? New Balance makes excellent shoes as well, but we buy Nike because we believe that they are great, because that is the message that they are always preaching, so to speak. So the only difference is that New Balance sells us on shoes and Nike sells us on greatness. The last case study example that I want to give before we jump into the practical side of this and what it means for you as a realtor, I want to talk about Martin Luther King Jr. because he is a person rather than a company, but the same thing applies. And I think this is kind of, this hits a little closer to home to being a real estate agent because the same is true. You are generally a one-man or one-woman show. So have you ever thought about why Martin Luther King Jr.? Why did he lead the civil rights movement when there were actually a lot of other people in his day that believed what he believed? He went around talking about what he believed all the time, and people resonated with that. And that is what made him set apart. That's what made him different. We can see this really clearly if we look at the historical results of his I Have a Dream speech, which we all are so familiar with. 250,000 people showed up for this event, even though there were no invitations sent out, no website for them to check the dates, no Facebook reminders. 250,000 people. So why did they show up? He stood for something that they believed in. They didn't show up for him. They honestly could have cared less who it was. They showed up for themselves. They believed something that he represented, and so they rallied behind him. If he had given a speech called I Have a Plan, I don't think as many people probably would have come. So just a quick summary on the principle of this. Your brand message is about effectively communicating why you do what you do and how you're different. And your why is going to help people resonate with you and want to do business with you. All right, so if you take away anything, those 2 points those are what I would really love for people to take away from this. So I want to talk about what is really the most practical and important part of this webinar. What does it mean for you? How can you take these principles and these examples and turn it into something that you can use to help your brand communicate better? So I've put together a list of questions that will help you get to the bottom of your brand message and determine your why. And again, these questions we have as a worksheet. So we've got a PDF that we can email to you later. So for now, you can just listen or whatever you feel most comfortable doing. But the questions are, what's your story? Why real estate? How did you land in this career path? When I say that, I'm not talking about, well, it's a job, I need an income. You could earn money doing other things. So focus on what you love about your job or why you feel it's important. Things more of that kind of nature. What do you believe in what do you believe in about helping buyers and sellers? What is that thing that drives you? How do you personally make the world of real estate a better place? What problems do you solve? I'm not talking about, something abstract. I'm talking about what's the most difficult part of a transaction in your mind from a seller or buyer perspective, and how do you come in and make that better? How would your closest friends or family members or past clients describe your strengths and why? Why are those your strengths? If your past clients had to pick 3 words to describe their business experience with you, what would they pick? I encourage you to actually ask people this if you have a way of doing that, because I think that will really help this gel. So this is all good and well, but it's still kind of a little elusive. So I want to give you a couple of examples. One is a real life example, and it's about Picture Perfect. And I chose Picture Perfect because obviously we know what our brand message is better than anyone. So let me go over what this would look like, and then I'll go over a fictional example after this. So our story is that for many years, Chris worked as an executive assistant to some of the top real estate agents in the area. She saw day in and day out how photography and marketing really makes or breaks an agent's success. So being the problem solver that she is, she continued making mental notes about the kind of platform that real estate agents might need to really become the best in the business. And eventually Picture Perfect was born as a one-stop shop solution to those needs. So that's who we are and where we came from and why we got to this point. Our why we do what we do is that we believe that superb quality and maximum exposure are the keys to real estate success. We believe that a picture is worth 1,000 words and that first impressions matter. We believe that streamlining and integrating all of someone's marketing needs into one platform increases their performance and efficiency, which in turn grows their business. And the problems we solve are, we know that finding the time to stay organized and on top of a million moving parts is not an easy task. So we come alongside you as a part of your team so that you have less to worry about. We provide the high quality photography, printable marketing material, social media integration, and marketing services you need, all from the same platform. We help you impress your clients with less headache. Okay, so that's an actual real life brand message. That's our brand message. But let's look at this again with a fictional example of Billy Bob Realtor. So Billy Bob is a realtor who specializes in investment properties. All right, so let's listen to his story and see how, notice how you're reacting to his story or what you're thinking about it as I go along. So his story is, I was born and raised right here in town. Growing up, my family was always tight on money, so by the time I became an adult, I was fending for myself, and everything I needed, I had to work hard for. Starting from scratch is never easy, and I found myself living paycheck to paycheck, even though I lived frugally. I began to wonder if there was a way out of this. How did other people break this cycle? I must not be the only one treading water like this. When a close friend told me about his successful stock market investments, I became intrigued and began to research investment opportunities. The more I learned about real estate investment, the more convinced I became that real estate is the most secure and steady investment with the biggest returns for the least amount of effort. So that's Billy Bob's story. So how exactly did he land in this career path? Like, why real estate? Why is he a realtor? I purchased a couple of rental properties as my grand real estate experiment. The numbers were working, my experiments were profitable, and I immediately became hooked. I began to study my local market. I networked with other investors. I learned what was working for them, and I continued investing personally. Eventually, as I shared my success stories with my friends and colleagues, they began to come to me for advice. I realized that I could use my skills to help this community that I love so much and which I know so well. I decided to make a career path out of sharing my knowledge and helping other real estate investors in my community. So what does Billy Bob believe in about helping buyers and sellers? Well, he believes that everything is overwhelming unless you know how it works. Buyers and sellers need someone experienced and knowledgeable to guide them through a process that would otherwise be very difficult to navigate without that knowledge. How does Billy Bob personally make the world of real estate a better place? Well, he says, I know practically everyone in town because I've lived here my whole life, and I use my connections and knowledge of the community to make local residents' dreams accessible. I help them realize investment potential and take advantage of those opportunities. And the problems that he solves are, he says, I take a transaction that seems daunting and make it easy to navigate. I'm cool and calm in stressful situations, and as such, I'm capable of tackling any issues or hurdles that come up throughout the transaction process. His closest friends, family members, and clients would describe his strengths as he is a go-getter, he stays on task, and he gets creative about solving problems. And if his past clients had to pick 3 words to describe him, they would say he is ambitious, organized, and an expert in his community. Okay, so we're wrapping up this part of the webinar. Before we get into the questions and answers, I want to boil this down, okay? So it's all good and well to have the story kind of ironed out, and that's what we just showed you a practical example of. But the way that you want to strike that chord with somebody is you take those answers to those questions. And I encourage you to actually go and do this as an exercise, because even if you know your brand, it will, I think, really help you gel it a little bit better. But you take those answers and you boil it down into a short paragraph. Then you're going to boil that down into a sentence, and that is your brand message. Now, from your brand message, you can say it in a few different ways and try to pick the catchiest of them all and then make your slogan from that. Okay, so let's make our final example an example of what it looks like to boil your brand message down like this. So let's go back to Billy Bob for a second. Billy Bob's answers to all those questions in one paragraph looks like this. I was born and raised right here in town. I wanted to break the cycle of living paycheck to paycheck. I realized that real estate is the most secure and steady investment with the biggest returns for the least amount of effort. I became an expert on real estate in my area and expanded my local network to find profitable opportunities. I made a career out of sharing my knowledge and helping other local investors in my community by guiding them through a process which can be daunting. I used my connections and knowledge of the community to make local residents' dreams accessible, bringing my ambitious, cool, calm, organized, and problem-solving life philosophy into every transaction. So that's, you know, he's saying the exact same thing, but just a shorter, more condensed version of it. Now, boiling that down into a sentence can be a little bit tricky, and sometimes will take a little while, but here's Billy Bob's sentence version. As an experienced local real estate investor, I believe in helping my local community break the paycheck to paycheck cycle through savvy real estate investment. And then lastly, if we boiled that down into a slogan, it would look something like this. Helping my community achieve financial freedom through savvy real estate investment. Okay, so think about how you reacted to Billy Bob. There were a lot of parts of his story that were relatable, right? All of us can relate to some part or another of his story if we're in the real estate industry. So that actually kind of makes you start liking him. You feel like you resonate with him, and that in turn really inspires confidence that he knows what he's talking about. So it's just interesting how that works. And if you can come across in that same kind of relatable, personable way, people will resonate with you better, especially because in real estate, your brand is really about you. So, you know, really keep that in mind. Be personal. Remember that your story is going to be like a lot of other people's stories. And so make it personal and inviting. And then I just want to stress that, you know, going through these questions is not always going to be a piece of cake. It's actually something that you're probably going to write down, walk away, come back, tweak, walk away, come back. It takes a lot of patience to really define your brand, but it can be done. You can see here, you know, practically how it would look. So I really encourage you, you know, don't rush it. Get other people involved if you can, people that know you well, because sometimes it's really good to have an outside perspective, people that you've worked with and things like that, friends and family. So in closing, I just want to say, you know, figure out what you're trying to communicate. That's step 1. And then step 2 is saying it concisely. I just want to, you know, practically speaking, also mention, we see a couple of versions of this brand message. We see the long version, the paragraph version. the sentence version, the slogan version. They can all be useful in different ways. So you might have the longer version as your about section on your website, or your bio, or your about section on Facebook. Whereas your sentence version or your slogan version, you would use more in an email signature, maybe a business card, different things like that. So they're all useful. They just have different applications and different ways that they would shine, so to speak.
And Tess, can I just say that, they should take these different versions and put it consistently everywhere, right? Like you said,
Right.
their website, their email signature, on all of their social media profiles.
Yeah.
It should be everywhere. Your story and your message should be consistent and everywhere, right?
Yes, definitely.
Like,
Definitely.
so this isn't a waste of time. It is really hard to do, believe me. But once you figure that out and you put it everywhere, it will help to brand you and it will help people to get to know you. Like, put it everywhere. Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's good. And also, like, this becomes kind of your new mindset for how you communicate. Even when you go to a listing presentation, it's about knowing, okay, this is what I represent. This is what I'm really trying to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really, like Chris said, it should be everywhere. It should be affecting everything, because your brand is really you. Again, it's just you.
Yeah.
So it's just about figuring out how to communicate it.
Yeah.
So that is about all I have to say. I think I went a little over 30 minutes, but we're going to open it up for questions and answers in just a second. But in case any of you need to cut out, I just want to mention that we are, again, going to be sending the PDF links. And we do have our next webinar date already. So that's going to be November 11th. And we're going to be talking about how to use, or how to set up social media correctly, kind of touching on what Chris just said, like what goes where, how are you supposed to really make it look good, and all of that. We're going to talk about finding and using hashtags, a program that we use for scheduling posts in advance, as well as uploading video to Instagram, a lot of good things like that. So you can jot that down. We will be announcing it as it gets closer to it. And then if you have an idea, because we would like to do more webinars. So if you have an idea for something that you really want to know more about, something you're interested in, then please let us know that. And I think that's it, right, Chris?
Yep. Great job.
So
yep.
I think question and answer time, if anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Debbie. Do I have to unmute people, or can people mute themselves? Unmute themselves.
We can unmute ourselves.
Huh?
We can unmute ourselves.
Oh, Margot, God bless. I know, like, this is our first official webinar. Holy cow.
Tess, you did an amazing job. Very proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Did this make
Thank
sense
you all so
to
much.
everybody? It's kind of hard to, like, explain everything in 30 minutes, but it really is about selling you and why you're different from all the other real estate agents, right? Because I mean, we have a lot of competition too. There's a bazillion real estate photographers, and what makes us different is our brand. It's what we stand for. It's how we do what we do. And so I think if you guys could figure that out, it would help to take your business to the next level, and then be consistent. Put it everywhere and be consistent.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's just about, I think for a lot of you, it's going to be like defining what you already do.
Yep.
For some of you, maybe not, but I think either way, it's just helpful. I mean, we go through periods where we're rethinking this too. Like, can we say it better? Can we communicate it better? So it's kind of like a process really that can always be built on, I think.
Anybody have any questions? Okay, I don't think so. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it, and feel free to reach out if you need any help with anything, okay? All right, thanks so much. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. I have to stop the recording. Oh, holy moly. Okay. Did I stop everybody?
I don't know.
I think so. Okay. How do I log out, Tess?
Oh, there's a couple of questions I just
Oh,
realized.
oh,
Let's see here.
where are they?
In the chat room. Let's
Oh,
see.
oh, for goodness sake.
Oh, I don't know if you're still on. Looks like Brianna asked a question. Do we have the time yet for the webinar? Not yet. I think she might not be on anymore. We don't have the time yet. We'll announce it, kind of like we did this one, you know, a couple weeks
Oh, yeah.
ahead of time.
Pippin said Steve Jobs actually created products and made people fall in love with its inventions.
Yeah, you did.
Well, that's
Steve
true. They created products, but really they created a love for their product. They made a yeah.
Yeah. Steve Jobs' products were, I mean, Apple has an amazing product,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of people that have amazing products, like we were talking about. Like Microsoft has an amazing product too, actually.
Yeah, I know.
But it's just how they communicate themselves.
Exactly. You know? Exactly. It's how they get people to think of their products so differently. I mean, everyone thinks that, you know, people in graphic design have to use a Mac. And I mean,
it's just not true.
It's just not true. And really, PCs are so much better than Macs, the specs. And for a limit, you know, for way less money, you get a way better system. I don't know. But again, it's the illusion they created. So good for them.
Yeah, and Steve Jobs was so cutting edge in everything that he said and did and everything he stood for that people just think Apple is cutting edge.
Exactly.
And all their computers are cutting edge.
And it's not even computers. I talked to Brandon about, he wears the Fitbit all the time, and he's like, well, maybe I should get an Apple Watch now. Like, that seems to be the better thing to get. And, you know, they just make it that you want it and that you have to have what they have and what they're selling.
Yeah.
Exactly. We all have to run out and buy the new iPhone when really Samsung or a different, lesser expensive phone does the exact same thing, but we all have to have the iPhone.
Yeah.
We drank the Apple Kool-Aid and we're convinced that that's what we have to have.
Yeah.
Because they're really good at marketing.
Yeah.
So the realtors just need to do the same thing.
Yeah. And how do you apply that to make yourself that where everybody flocks to you and wants to wait for you and wants you on their team, you know?
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
It's obviously it's obviously a little bit different when you're talking about a $1 billion company versus a one-person show, but the principle is the same. Like whether you've got millions of people that recognize you or hundreds of people, there's still, you know, there's something about you that they believe. So are you have you conveyed it in a way that what they believe is true or what you want them to believe?
Exactly.
You know, like it's definitely a psychological thing, and there's so much more psychology in marketing than people realize, and people just tend to kind of try to throw themselves out there, you know, work with me, but it's like, well, then you just blend in to the sea of other people who are doing that. So you have to give them a reason to bite, you know. And, it's
and
really
you're gonna
good stuff.
Yeah, and you're gonna resonate. When you resonate with someone, then they're going to tell their, you know, you're gonna be at the top of their minds. Like when anybody mentions real estate, you're gonna be like, oh, this person, this is the person, and they're gonna, because they resonated so well with you, they're gonna want to refer you. And anytime that kind of clicks in their head, they're gonna think of you.
Exactly.
Yeah, just like the tiny little example I gave towards the beginning about, you know, why you sell homes, let's say, is so that it's not stressful. You believe that doesn't have to be stressful. You know, if you're always saying, you know, it doesn't have to be stressful, your clients are going to come away and be like, oh wow, that was like the least stressful experience, because that's in their mind. And that's what they're going to tell somebody else. It's like, oh, if you want a stress-free experience, you got to use this person. So like, it's just about, again, that comes down to consistency too, because if you're telling them stress-free, and that's your brand, that's what they're going to remember.
Exactly.
Very cool.
Yeah, it is. It's fascinating, like how the human brain works, and that this stuff is actually like, it's proven, it's tried and true. Like you look at Apple, you look at Nike, you look at Martin Luther King Jr., like just those three things alone, it's like, wow, that actually works.
Yeah,
So,
I loved your analogy between Nike and New Balance and Apple and Macintosh. I mean, Apple and Microsoft. Same company doing the same thing. How we look at those products differently is amazing. And it's because
Mhm.
they sold us on how they're different. You know what I mean? They sold us on their brand. I
Yeah.
always buy Nike. I don't even look at any other shoes. I always buy Nike. Um,
yeah,
it's
Hmm.
it's very powerful.
Yeah.
it's
It really
amazing.
is.
It's really powerful.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any other questions? There's a couple. Christine is still here and Mary Beth. I'm sorry I didn't see those chats. I didn't realize it was down there. But if anybody has any other questions, please feel free to ask us or to reach out later. I'm excited for your next webinar test because really once you establish your brand, then you have to put it into action, right? Then you have to make sure it's everywhere. And social media is a huge, huge platform all the agents need to have. And they have to make sure their Facebook page is filled out correctly, LinkedIn, Pinterest, Instagram, YouTube. I mean, it is so huge now in the way that we do business that the agents who don't have the social media and who don't use it correctly, I think have a harder time competing in the market, in my opinion, because that's
Yeah,
where
definitely.
everybody is, right? Everybody's online. Every night, everybody's on Facebook.
Yeah, you got to have the exposure.
Exactly. You know, everybody loves Instagram. They love Pinterest. You know, so many things to take advantage of, sadly. It's not just about doing normal business anymore. You know, we have to kind of rethink the way we do business in this digital world. We don't run print advertising anymore. Why? There's a reason for that, because no one looks at the newspapers and the magazines. They're all online. So I'm excited about our next webinar. I know we as a company have really tried to take advantage of all of that online presence because I feel it's so important.
Yeah,
All right.
definitely.
Anything else?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Tess will email everybody the worksheets and the notes and the slides and all of that. All right. Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.